Darkness, fear, desperation. For years, the Israelites had been slaves in Egypt, beaten, broken, and trapped under Pharaoh's rule. But then things took a turn for the worse. A new decree echoed through the land, a command so cruel it sent shockwaves through every home. Every Hebrew baby boy was to be thrown into the Nile. No mercy, no escape, just gone. Imagine the terror, mothers clutching their newborns, fathers trying to silence their cries, families knowing that at any moment soldiers could come knocking. But one mother, she refused to accept this fate. She did something unthinkable. She took her baby, placed him in a basket, and let him drift into the unknown. The currents could take him anywhere. He could be lost forever. But she had no choice. It was either let go or watch him be taken. And that baby? He was no ordinary child. He was destined to change history. This is where the story begins. Oh, and quick heads up. I was meant to start this video by finishing our fishing dock, but let's just say my gameplay file decided to just not work apparently. So I'll toss a time lapse at the end so you can still see it. Low-key one of my ugliest builds unfortunately. But first, let's dive into the story. Today we're covering Exodus 1 and 2, where Moses' story begins. By the end of this video you'll see how a single act of courage changed history, why faith sometimes means letting go even when it's terrifying, and how God can turn the worst situations into something greater than we can imagine. This isn't just an old story, it's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there's always a plan. Let's get into it. The story of Exodus begins with a nation in crisis. The Israelites, once honoured in Egypt because of Joseph's leadership, have now become too numerous to ignore. But time has passed and a new Pharaoh has taken the throne, one who doesn't remember Joseph or the good he did for Egypt. And Pharaoh is afraid. He looks at the Israelites, strong, growing and beyond his control, and sees them as a threat to his kingdom. Look, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. Exodus 1:9-10. So Pharaoh makes a ruthless decision. Force them into hard labour. Bricks, whips, endless work. The Israelites are placed under cruel taskmasters, forced to build Egypt's cities under brutal conditions. But no matter how much they suffer, they keep multiplying. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. Exodus 1:12. Pharaoh's plan is failing. So he takes things even further, darker. If he can't break them through labour, he will destroy their future. He calls for the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, and orders them to kill every baby boy at birth. If there are no sons, there will be no warriors, no next generation, no future. But these women, they fear God more than they fear Pharaoh. They refuse. They let the babies live. And when Pharaoh demands an answer, they stand their ground, telling him, "The Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are lively and give birth before the midwives come to them." Exodus 1:19. For their courage, God blesses them, and their families grow even stronger. But Pharaoh, he's not finished yet. His final order is a nightmare. Every Hebrew baby boy must be thrown into the Nile. No more secrecy. No more midwives. The entire kingdom is ordered to carry it out. The river that gives Egypt life is now a place of death. Imagine the fear, parents hiding their newborns, hoping no one turns them in, mothers trying to silence their crying babies, praying no soldiers come knocking. Every family with a son is living in a constant state of dread. And in this moment, it seems like all hope is lost. The Israelites have no power. Their sons are being taken from them. The future looks impossible. But God is about to do something unthinkable, because in the middle of all this darkness, a single baby is about to survive the river. And that child, He will grow up to stand before Pharaoh himself and lead his people to freedom. This is just the beginning. The nightmare in Egypt continues. Every Hebrew baby boy is to be thrown into the Nile. Families are living in fear, desperately trying to hide their children. But in the midst of this chaos, one mother refuses to give up. She gives birth to a son, and for 3 months, she hides him, praying he won't be found. But she knows she can't keep him hidden forever. So, she does the unthinkable. She takes a basket, seals it with pitch, and places her son inside. Then, with trembling hands, she sets the basket into the river and lets go. Imagine that moment, the desperation, the heartbreak, the faith it takes to release your child into the unknown. The waters could take him anywhere. He could be lost forever. But she chooses to trust. The basket drifts down the Nile, floating past dangers until it comes to an unexpected stop, right where Pharaoh's own daughter is bathing. She hears a cry, she opens the basket, and the moment she sees the child inside, she knows exactly who he is. "This is one of the Hebrews' children," she says. Exodus 2:6. She could have handed him over. She could have obeyed her father's command, but instead she chooses mercy. She takes the child in as her own, unknowingly saving the very one who will one day defy Pharaoh himself. And in a twist only God could orchestrate, the baby's own mother is brought in to nurse him, giving her more time with her son before he is raised as an Egyptian prince. And that child? His name is Moses. He grows up in Pharaoh's palace, trained in the ways of Egypt, given wealth, power, and status. But deep inside, he knows he is not truly one of them. He sees the suffering of his people. He sees their burdens. And one day, in a moment of anger, he kills an Egyptian who was beating an Israelite. Moses thinks no one saw. But word spreads. Pharaoh wants him dead. So Moses runs. He flees Egypt, leaving behind his royal life and everything he's ever known. He escapes into the wilderness of Midian, where he becomes nothing more than a shepherd in exile. For years, he lives in the desert, far from the power and influence of Egypt. He marries. He has children. And it seems like his story is over. But it isn't, because out in the wilderness, in the middle of nowhere, God is about to call him back. The Israelites are still suffering. They are still crying out for rescue. And Exodus 2 ends with this powerful verse. "And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew." Exodus 2:24-25. The stage is set. Pharaoh believes Moses is gone forever. The Israelites believe no one is coming to save them. But God is not finished yet. Alright, disciples, let's talk. Moses' story isn't just history. It's a mirror to the struggles people are facing today. In Exodus 2, the Israelites were crying out, crushed under burdens they couldn't carry. And it felt like God was silent. But he wasn't. He was watching. He was listening. He was getting ready to move. And that hits home in 2025 because let's be real. Life feels like a battle right now. Some of you are drowning in financial pressure. You're grinding every day, working yourself to exhaustion. And still, it feels like you're falling behind. Others are battling anxiety, depression, and burnout. Watching highlight reels of people who seem to have it all while you wonder if you'll ever feel whole. And some of you feel like you've completely missed your shot. You had dreams, plans, ambitions, but now you feel stuck, lost, wandering in a desert with no way out. But here's the truth. Exodus 2 says, "And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant." God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. God knows. He knows what you're facing. He sees what you're carrying. He hears the prayers you don't even have the strength to say. And just because you don't see him moving yet, doesn't mean he's not already setting things in motion. Moses thought his story was over. He ran. He hid. He accepted an ordinary life in the wilderness, convinced that he had failed, that his past had disqualified him. But God had other plans. Because while Moses thought he was forgotten, God was preparing him. The desert wasn't a dead end, it was training. The waiting wasn't a waste, it was necessary. Because the man who once ran in fear was about to walk back into Egypt with fire in his bones and demand, "Let my people go." And let me tell you right now, Some of you are in your desert season, but it does not mean you are finished. That struggle, it's shaping you. That failure, it's not the end of your story. That setback, it's a setup for something greater. Moses had no idea that his past, his pain, and his wilderness were all leading him to his biggest moment. And you? You don't see it yet, but God is already setting you up for something bigger than you can imagine. So stop believing the lie that you're done. You are not done. Your Red Sea moment is coming. Your breakthrough is coming. Your purpose is still alive. And just like Moses, when the time comes, you'll be ready to stand before whatever has been holding you back and declare, "Let me go. I am not staying in this place. My story isn't over." So get up, keep pushing, keep fighting, because this is just the beginning. If you're still here, you're a real one. Seriously, I see you. I appreciate you. And if this hit home for you today, if you felt something shift even just a little, know that you are not alone in this. I love you. God loves you. And we're just getting started. So if you haven't already, like the video, hit subscribe and drop a comment. Let me know what part of this story spoke to you the most. Let's keep building this community, one legend at a time. I'll see you in the next one.